So I've always had a curiosity to know the truth. I want to know the truth. I don't want to just blindly believe what you tell me. And I don't want you to blindly believe what I tell you. Well, maybe a little bit I do. But so a lot of what I'm sharing today comes from this book. The last week. And some of you will recognize one of the authors, John Dominic Crossan and Marcus Borg, who are some of the leading Bible scholars. If you want these holidays to come alive, I highly recommend this book because they have researched the life of Jesus and they have researched Jewish traditions and all that transpired around this. So Unity likes to focus on the spiritual aspect, and certainly I'll do some of that today. But I'm starting with a history lesson because it is eye-opening. On Palm Sunday, Jesus is coming into Jerusalem, and he tells his disciples, go into town and you'll find a colt there. It's never been ridden. And you tell him the Lord needs it. Okay, how did he know that? All my life I thought he's psychic, he's Jesus, he knows everything. Well, the scholars say this was a planned event, and it was planned to fulfill the prophecies of, I think it was Zechariah from the Old Testament, because that prophet said, oh, the Messiah will come riding on a donkey. So he had to come in riding on a donkey if he wanted people to believe that he had any authority at all. So he comes riding in, and people hear that he is entering the city, and word travels fast. He had raised somebody from the dead. He had done many, many miracles, and they were eager to see him and to meet him and maybe even be healed by him. So that's where Hosanna in the highest and the palms, and they laid it down so the poor little colt's feet wouldn't touch the rocky road. You know, just kind of a carpet type thing. And they were rejoicing in his coming. That's coming in from the east. From the west side, Pontius Pilate's coming in. And they're coming in because of the Passover, not because they want to honor the Jews, but to keep peace, because all those rebel Jewish people could really get out there during Passover. So here comes the emperor coming in with his chariot and a marching band and all the soldiers, and it was quite a display of power and might and opulence. In contrast to the poor little peasants. You know, Jesus really, his message was for the peasants. It's for everyone. But he hung out with the peasant people. He hung out in the small little cities, not the great big ones where the wealthy people lived. So they're coming into Jerusalem. Jerusalem was the Jewish capital of ancient Israel. Jerusalem was a place of where the temple was, and the temple was very important in the life of these people. So let's talk about King David. He was such a just and beloved ruler. It was the best time in Jewish history, according to these two guys. The best time. So when David ruled no longer, his son Solomon came along. And Solomon, we know about the wisdom of Solomon. Solomon built this massive temple on acres and acres of property. The temple was considered to be the house of God. Now, God's everywhere present, but he really liked this temple. He really liked this temple. So this was the house of God. And it was a place of devotion for the Jewish people, and also a place of pilgrimage. People wanted to come to the temple. Why? Because it was the only place where forgiveness could be bestowed. And the only way forgiveness was bestowed was through a sacrifice. So people were required to come to the temple and do a sacrifice. Okay, well, the Jewish people stormed the temple, destroyed the temple, a lot of history there, back and forth. The temple became a place where government was housed. It wasn't just a place of worship. It was also a community center. It became the governing center. And then corruption, we'll say, started kind of creeping in a little bit. When the Romans conquered, their way of ruling the Jewish people was to take someone from the elite class, someone with power and money, to rule over the Jewish people, mainly to keep peace, and also to help them facilitate their rituals. So let's say the high priests were kind of a balancing act. They had to keep the Rome happy, mainly by giving them money, having the little people pay their taxes. So this was not in accordance with Jewish tradition or what the Jewish law was. So it became a hotbed of rebels. Jesus wasn't the only voice who was calling out in the wilderness for the restoration of the Jewish God, not the God that had become one that you purchase. So Jesus is coming into Jerusalem. And the people are so happy. These are the same people who later on say, give us Barabbas, when they had an opportunity to free Jesus. Jesus knew exactly what he was doing. He knew that coming in to Jerusalem at the time of the Passover and being so public that he would be captured and that he would be crucified. Incidentally, these authors say that the Romans were the only people who could crucify, and they only crucified for one thing, and that was not recognizing the imperial authority. Something else interesting, okay? Well, I'll just do this. According to this book, there were three ways the Jewish people were ruled. One was politically oppressive. Only the wealthy and the aristocracy could rule the people. The little people didn't have anything to say about their destiny or what their lives were like. The second way was economic exploitation. Only the wealthy owned land. Now the peasants, they had land too. And according to Jewish law, they couldn't be bought or sold. It had to stay with the family to ensure that everybody had a piece of land. But the land was often confiscated for various reasons by the people in power. So they became like little indentured servants. Up to 75% of all the wealth that came from working the land, because it was agrarian, went to the pockets of the wealthy. The third way was religious legitimization. And this is what is. God ordained this. This dominant system is what God ordained. And they believed that because Augustus claimed that his father was a god and had impregnated his mother. Therefore, he was the emperor by divine right. And every emperor after that ruled by divine right. And it was said that when Augustus died, are you ready for this? He ascended into heaven to be with the gods who were his relatives. So, there's a lot here to ponder. And, I have to think, wow, this is probably my last Palm Sunday talk, and I'm throwing a wet blanket on this. But at the same time, I encourage all of us to look for the truth embedded in our traditions. Look for the truth. For Jesus going into Jerusalem, I'm sure, being a human being too, that he was torn. Well, we know. We know that he was. One of the Gospels said that he wept blood. One of the Gospels tell us, that he said, if there's any way that I can avoid this, let me do it. Let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done. And that's one of the greatest prayers ever. It's my go-to prayer. It really is. That and forgive them, for they know not what they do. So, the point was, Pontius Pilate and all the people of the temple who had to please the Romans were so afraid of Jesus because he was so popular. And if he could forgive sins without a sacrifice, if he could forgive sins outside the temple, oh my gosh, that undermined the authority of the temple. And they were quite afraid that the Romans would come in and just obliterate everybody, and they would be out of power. So you see this tension here. This is Holy Week. This is the week Jesus overturned the tables. This is the week that one account says he cracked a whip. This is the week where the Passion is called the Passion. The Passion of Jesus rose up to the point of the crucifixion. So, there's 2 parades, and this is the point they make. 2 parades. I'll just share what they said, because it was so poetic, I thought. Two processions entered Jerusalem on that day. The same question, the same alternative, faces those who would be faithful to Jesus today. Which procession are we in? Which procession do we want to be in? This is the question of Palm Sunday and of the week that is about to unfold. Jesus was not about power. He was not saying, worship me. That came later. It was not about that. He was saying, follow me. This is the path to true freedom. This is the path to justice. This is the path to equality. Because when you have the Christ mind, the same mind that was in Jesus, these things naturally unfold. They naturally unfold. When we're committed to walking the spiritual path and recommit every day, or every time we're challenged, we forgive ourselves when we fail, and we say, okay, back to the purpose, the holy purpose, which is to be the light of God in expression. When we commit to that, there is no need for external power. There's not even any need for a whole lot of money. Some people take vow of poverty, and they do just fine. So I'm not encouraging that. I'm encouraging you to follow your heart and to commit to that. Now, next Sunday is Easter. Don't forget a lily. Don't forget to let me know you're bringing a lily, if you are, so that I can put an insert with your name on it. I feel like I just gave a lecture, and I want to say, are there any questions?